1801. Mr. Lockwood had just returned from a visit to his landlord and solitary neighbour. He thought this to be a beautiful country. In all England he did not believe that he could have fixed on a situation so completely removed from the stir of society. A perfect misanthropist's heaven, and Mr. Heathcliff and he seemed such a suitable pair to divide the desolation between them. A capital fellow, no doubt, who little imagined how Lockwood's heart warmed towards him when he beheld Heathcliff's black eyes withdraw so suspiciously under their brows as he rode up. Lockwood announced his name.
Mr. Heathcliff? Mr. Lockwood, your new tenant, sir.
Wuthering Heights, the abode of his landlord, was in an exposed position. The local word wuthering is descriptive of the atmospheric tumult to which it is exposed in stormy weather. One may guess the power of the north wind blowing over the edge by the excessive slant of a few stunted firs at the end of the house, and by a range of gaunt thorns all stretching their limbs one way as if craving arms of the sun. Mr. Heathcliff was a dark-skinned gypsy in aspect. In dress and manners, a gentleman. Rather slovenly, perhaps, yet not looking amiss with his negligence, because he had an erect and handsome figure. One step brought Lockwood into the family sitting room. In an arch under the dresser reposed a huge liver-coloured pointer, surrounded by a swarm of squealing puppies, and other dogs haunted other recesses. Lockwood took a seat at the end of the hearthstone. He attempted to caress the canine mother, who had now left her puppies and was sneaking wolfishly towards the back of his legs, her lip curled up and her white teeth watering, ready to bite. In a fury she leapt at him and he flung her back. This proceeding roused all the other dogs, who fell upon him.
What the devil is the matter, Zilla? Not bitten, are you?
If I had been, I would have set my signet on the biter.
Come, you are flurried, Mr. Lockwood. Here, take a little wine. Guests are so exceedingly rare in this house that I and my dogs hardly know how to receive them. Your health, sir?
Thank you.
Trust that you find Mrs. Dean to be an excellent housekeeper. She has served in the family many years.
Yes, indeed.
He found his landlord very intelligent on the topics they touched. He knew by instinct that Heathcliff's reserve sprang from an aversion to showy displays of feeling. Since Lockwood's own unhappy encounter with a lady where he gained the undeserved reputation of heartlessness, he had shrunk icily into himself, like a snail.
Sit down. He'll be here soon.
Isn't this one Juno? A beautiful animal. What a wild evening.
You should not have come out.
May I help you lift the kettle from the fire?
I don't want your help. I can get it for myself.
I beg your pardon.
Were you asked to tea?
I shall be glad to have a cup, and I fear that I shall be weather-bound for half an hour. If you could afford me shelter during that space?
Half an hour. I wonder you should select the thick of a snowstorm to ramble about in. Do you know that you run the risk of being lost in the marshes? People familiar with these moors often miss their road on such evenings, and I can tell you there is no chance of a change at present.
Perhaps I could get a guide among your lads, and he could stay at the Grange till morning. Could you spare me one?
No, I could not.
Oh, indeed.
Are you going to make the tea?
Is he to have any?
Get it ready, will you? Now, sir, bring forward your chair.
I don't think it possible for me to get home without a guide.
As to staying here, I don't keep accommodations for visitors.
Zilla, the stout housewife who had come to Lockwood's rescue with the dogs, gave him a glass of brandy, sympathized with his sorry predicament, and showed him upstairs to his room.
Just you hide the candle and don't you make a noise. The master has some odd notion about this room, and we'd never let anyone lodge here willingly.
Why is that?
I don't know, sir. I've only lived here a year or two. They've so many queer goings-on, I canna begin to be curious.
Too stupefied to be curious, he fastened his door and glanced around. He discovered an old-fashioned couch within a large oak case, with squares cut out near the top, resembling coach windows. He got in with his light, pulled the panelled sides together again, and felt secure against the vigilance of Heathcliff or anyone else. The window ledge where he placed his candle had a few mildewed books piled up in one corner, and it was covered with writing scratched on the paint. This writing, however, was nothing but a name repeated in all kinds of characters, large and small. Earnshaw, here and there varied to Cathy, Heathcliff, and then again to Cathy Linton. Listlessly he leaned his head against the window and continued spelling over Cathy, Earnshaw, Heathcliff, Linton, till his eyes started to close. But they had not rested 5 minutes when a glare of white letters started from the dark as vivid as spectres. The air swarmed with Cathy's. Rousing himself to dispel the obtrusive name, he discovered his candle wick reclining on one of the antique volumes, and perfuming the place with an odour of roasted calf skin. He snuffed it off, and very ill at ease under the influence of cold and lingering nausea, sat up and spread open the injured tome on his knee. A fly-leaf bore the inscription, Cathy Earnshaw, her book, in an unformed, childish hand.
An awful Sunday. Hindley's conduct to Heathcliff is atrocious. The H and I are going to rebel. We used to be permitted to play on a Sunday, if we did not make too much noise. Oh, Hindley is a tyrant. Since my father died, Hindley has treated H like a servant. He won't let him sit with us or eat with us anymore. And he says he and I must not play together. If we break his orders, he threatens to turn him out of the house.
He began to nod drowsily over the dim page. Alas for the effects of bad tea and bad temper. What else could it have been that made him pass such a terrible night? He began to dream. A mob of spectres marched threateningly towards him with raised clubs. A shower of loud taps at last, to his utter relief, woke him. And what was it that had suggested the tumult? Merely the branch of a fir tree that touched his lattice as the blast wailed by and rattled its dry cones against the panes. He turned and dozed and dreamt again, if possible still more disagreeably than before. This time he was lying in the oak closet, and he heard distinctly the gusty wind and the driving of the snow. He heard also the fir bough repeat its teasing sound, but it annoyed him so much that he resolved to silence it, if possible. He thought that he arose and endeavoured to unhasp the casement. The hasp was soldered to the staple, a circumstance observed by him when awake, but forgotten. Knocking his knuckles through the glass, he stretched an arm out to seize the importunate branch, instead of which his fingers closed on a little ice-cold hand. The intense horror of nightmare came over him. He tried to draw back his arm, but the hand clung to it, and a most melancholy voice sobbed in the wind.
Let me in. Let me in.
Who are you?
Kathy Lind.
Begone! I'll never let you in. Not if you begged for 20 years.
He discerned obscurely a child's face looking through the window. Still it wailed and maintained its tenacious grip, almost maddening him with fear. Terror made him cruel, attempting to shake the creature off. He pulled its wrist onto the broken pane and rubbed it to and fro till the blood ran down and soaked the bedclothes. The fingers relaxed. He snatched his own through the hole, hurriedly piled the books up in a pyramid against it. Thereat began a feeble scratching outside, and the pile of books moved as if thrust forward. Somebody pushed open his chamber door with a vigorous hand, and a light glimmered through the squares at the top of the bed. He would not soon forget the effect his action produced. Heathcliff stood near the entrance, in his shirt and trousers, with a candle dripping over his fingers and his face as white as the wall behind him. He opened the panel. The first creak of the oak startled him like an electric shock. The light leaped from his hold to a distance of some feet, and his agitation was so extreme that he could hardly pick it up.
It is only your guest, sir. I had the misfortune to scream in my sleep, owing to a dreadful nightmare. I'm sorry I disturbed you.
God confound you, Mr. Lockwood. I wish you were at the... Ha! Who showed you up into this room? Who was it? I could mind to turn them out of the house this moment.
It was your servant, Zilla.
Take the candle and go where you please. I shall join you directly. Keep out of the yard. The dogs are unchained.
Heathcliff accompanied Lockwood across the moor to the entrance of Thorncross Park. They exchanged little conversation on the way. Their adieus were limited to a hasty bow. The staff welcomed Lockwood with delight, as they had thought he had perished. He was benumbed to his very heart, and dragged himself upstairs to change into dry clothes. He then adjourned to his study to await the arrival of Mrs. Dean with his supper. He was hoping sincerely that she would prove to be a regular gossip, and either rouse him to animation or lull him to sleep by her talk.
Thank you, Mrs. Dean. Mrs. Dean, you have lived here a considerable time. Did you not say 16 years?
18, sir. I came when the mistress was married to wait on her. After she died, the master retained me for his housekeeper.
You've seen a good many alterations, I suppose.
I have. Hand troubles, too.
I wonder why Mr. Heathcliff has let Thrushcross Grange. Is he not rich enough to keep the estate in good order?
Rich, sir? He's nobody knows how much money, and every year it increases. Yes, he's rich enough to live in a finer house than this, but he's very near, close-handed. As soon as he heard of a good tenant, he could not have borne to miss the chance of getting a few hundreds more. It's strange people should be so greedy when they're alone in the world. And how did you like the master?
A rough fellow, rather, Mrs. Dean.
He's as rough as a saw edge and hard as whinstone. The less you meddle with him, the better.
He must have had some ups and downs in life to make him such a churl. Do you know anything of his history?
It's a cuckoo, sir. No one knows of his origins.
Well, Mrs. Dean, it would be a charity to tell me something of my neighbours.
I shall be glad to tell you something of our history. It was the beginning of harvest when the old master, Mr. Earnshaw, returned from a visit to Liverpool. He'd a dirty, ragged, black-haired child bundled up in his coat that gibbered in some unknown tongue. He'd found it abandoned, so he'd brought it home with him. From the day he arrived, Heathcliff bred bad feeling, with the master often favouring him. By his death, young Master Hindley had come to regard his father as a bully, and Heathcliff as replacing him in his father's affections. Young Cathy was always very lively, but when Heathcliff came into the house, she became quite wilful and very attached to him. She fanned the flames of the master's dislike of the boy.
The whole house is in an uproar because Cathy has not come home. She's off again with that wretched boy Heathcliff.
Cathy and Heathcliff have always been inseparable, Mistress Frances. Since you had the lad cast out, Cathy's been inconsolable.
Where can they have got to? It's going to pour with rain.
It's very late, Mr. Hindley. I'm sure that Heathcliff won't have let any harm come to Cathy. I'll wait up and let you know the minute they arrive.
Let's hope that Cathy will benefit from her stay at Thrushcross Grange.
I'd have been terrified. A huge slavering dog pinning me by the ankle. Why should she and Heathcliff have been spying on the young Lintons?
Heathcliff told me that they were fascinated by the splendour of the sitting room. I don't think they'd ever seen a chandelier before.
Oh, Heathcliff should be flogged for taking Cathy there.
But he didn't run away when Cathy was attacked. He stayed until Mr. Linton sent him home. You may dislike Heathcliff, but he is always loyal to Cathy, unlike young Master Edgar Linton, who was tussling with his sister Isabella over a puppy which, so Heathcliff told me, they'd nearly torn in two between them.
Cathy will be away some time.
Cathy stayed at Thrushcross Grange for 5 weeks. Mr. Linton rode over to see Hindley, reading him such a lecture on the road he guided his family that he was stirred to bethink him of his ways. Heathcliff wasn't flogged, and by Christmas, her ankle thoroughly cured and her manners much improved, our Miss Cathy returned to us, riding on a handsome black pony. Heathcliff watched her arrival anxiously from within the house. Hindley had warned him to keep away.
Why, Cathy, you're quite a beauty. I should scarcely have known you. You look like a lady now with your new fine clothes. Isabella Linton is not to be compared with her, is she, Francis?
Isabella has not her natural advantages, but Cathy must mind and not grow wild again here. Ellen, help Miss Cathy off with her things. Or stay, dear, you'll disarrange your curls. Let me untie your hat.
But where is Heathcliff? Oh, don't hug me, Nellie. You're all covered in flour.
Heathcliff, you may come forward. You may come and wish Miss Cathy welcome like the other servants.
Why, Heathcliff, how very black and cross you look. And how funny and grim. Oh, but that's because I'm used to Edgar and Isabella Linton. Well, Heathcliff, have you forgotten me?
Shake hands, Heathcliff. Once in a way. That is permitted.
But why is he so bad-tempered?
Now, Miss Cathy, Heathcliff could never bear to be laughed at.
I did not mean to laugh at him. I could not hinder myself. It was only that he looked so odd. If he would only wash his face and brush his hair, it would be all right. Oh, but he's so dirty.
The poor lad was jealous of Edgar Linton, but I assured him that good looks were of less importance than a good heart.
What's this, Nellie? Why is Heathcliff here? Send him to the garret until dinner is over. He'll be cramming his fingers in the tarts and stealing the fruit if left alone with them for a minute.
Nay, Mistress Frances, he'll touch nothing, not he. And I suppose he must have his share of the dainties as well as we.
He shall have that share of my hand if I catch him downstairs till dark. Wait till I get hold of those elegant locks. See if I won't pull them longer.
Heathcliff, no!
Heathcliff flung some water over Edgar, who'd added his own insults. Hindley hustled Heathcliff out of the room, whilst Edgar, who'd burst into tears, was severely admonished by Cathy, who knew that Hindley would administer a flogging. However, I were pained to behold Cathy, with dry eyes and an indifferent air, commence cutting up the wing of a goose. But then she set it down again. Her cheeks flushed, and the tears gushed over them. I perceived her to be in purgatory throughout the day, wearying to find an opportunity of paying a visit to Heathcliff. Later, I discovered that the little monkey had crept along the roof and entered the garret through the skylight. I coaxed her out with great difficulty. Heathcliff swore that he would have his revenge on Hindley, no matter how long it took him to accomplish it.
But, Mr. Lockwood, I forget these tales cannot divert you. Your gruel will be cold and you nodding for bed.
Sit down, Mrs. Dean, please.
The clock is on the stroke of 11.
No matter.
Now, if I'm to follow my story in true gossip's fashion, I'd better go on. Let me continue my story from the following summer. The summer of 1778, that is, nearly 23 years ago. On the morning of a fine June day, Hareton was born. The doctor spoke very gravely about the mistress's health. I were very sad for Hindley's sake. On her death, he neither wept nor prayed. He execrated God and man, and gave himself up to reckless dissipation. Heathcliff was delighted to witness Hindley degrading himself past redemption. The master's bad ways and bad companions formed a pretty example to Cathy and Heathcliff. His treatment of the latter was enough to make a fiend of a saint. And truly, it appeared as if the lad were possessed of something diabolical. Cathy had a wondrous consistency in old attachments, and Heathcliff kept his hold on her affections unalterably, though it ceased to express his fondness for her in words. At 15, She were the queen of the countryside, a haughty and headstrong creature. I own I did not like her after infancy was past, though she never took an aversion to me. Hindley's bad ways ensured that no one decent came near us. Even the curate stopped calling. Cathy had kept up her acquaintance with Edgar Linton, although she tried to conceal this from Heathcliff.
What are you doing here, Nellie?
My work, miss.
Pick yourself and your dusters off. When company are in the house, servants don't commence the scouring and cleaning in the room where they are.
But it's a good opportunity now that the master's away. He hates me to be fidgeting over these things in his presence, and I'm sure Mr. Edgar will excuse me.
I hate you to be fidgeting in my presence. But give me that!
Don't snatch, Miss Cathy. Ooh, that's a nasty trick. You've no call to nip me, and I'm not going to put up with such wicked behaviour.
I didn't touch you, you lying creature.
What's this purple mark, then?
There. I've found you both at last. You tried to murder the child.
Hey.
There's a conspiracy to keep him away from me. But with the help of Satan, I'll make you swallow this carving knife. Oh, I see that hideous little villain can't be Hareton. I beg your pardon, Nellie. My son would have run to welcome me. You unnatural cub. Come hither. Don't you think he'd look better with his ears cut off? Get me the scissors. Devilish conceit it is to cherish the ears. We're asses enough without them. Hush, child. Hush. Well, then it is my darling. Wished. Dry thy eye. Give your dear father a kiss, my joy. What? Wilt not? By God, as if I could rear such a monster.
Put the child down, Miss Heathcliff. Come away from the stairs.
As sure as I'm living, I'll break the brat's neck.
No, Miss Heathcliff, no. Not over the railings.
Stop squirming. Oh, ah!
Oh, Heathcliff! Oh, thank God you caught him.
Where's Heathcliff, Nellie?
About his work in the stable, miss.
Oh, dear. I'm very unhappy.
Pity. You're hard to please. So many friends and so few cares, and can't make yourself content.
Nellie, will you keep a secret for me?
Is it worth keeping?
Yes, and it worries me. And I must let it out. I want to know what I should do.
Yes?
Today, Edgar Linton asked me to marry him, and I've given him an answer. Now, before I tell you whether it was a consent or a denial, you tell me which it ought to have been.
Oh, really, Miss Cathy, how can I know? To be sure, after the exhibition you performed in his presence only a short while ago, I might say it'd be wise to refuse him. But since he asked you after that, well, he must either be hopelessly stupid or a venturesome fool.
If you talk...
You have pledged your word and you cannot retract.
But say whether I should have done so. Do.
There are many things to be considered before that question can be answered properly. Now, first and foremost, do you love Mr. Edgar?
Who can help it? Of course I do.
Why do you love him, Miss Cathy?
I do. That's sufficient.
Oh, by no means. You must say why.
Well, because he is handsome and pleasant to be with.
Bad.
And because he is young and cheerful.
Bad still.
And because he loves me.
Huh, indifferent coming there.
And he will be rich. And I shall like to be the greatest woman of the neighbourhood. And I shall be proud of having such a husband.
Worst of all. And now, say how you love him.
As everybody loves. You're silly, Nellie.
Oh, not at all. Now answer.
I love the ground under his feet and the air over his head and everything he touches and every word he says. I love his looks and all his actions and him entirely and altogether. There now.
And why?
Oh, nay, you are making a jest of it. It is exceedingly ill-natured. It's no jest to me.
I'm very far from jesting, Miss Cathy. You love Mr. Edgar because he is handsome and young and cheerful and rich and loves you. Huh. The last, however, goes for nothing. You'd love him without that, probably, and with it you wouldn't, unless he possessed the 4 former attractions.
No, to be sure not. I should only pity him, hate him, perhaps, if he were ugly and a clown.
Oh, but there are several other handsome, rich young men in the world. Handsomer, possibly, and richer than he is. What'd hinder you from loving them?
If there are any, they are out of my way. I've seen none like Edgar.
You may see some, and he won't always be handsome and young, and may not always be rich.
He is now, and I have only to do with the present. I wish you would speak rationally.
Well, that settles it. If you've only to do with the present, marry Mr. Linton.
I don't want your permission for that. I shall marry him. And yet you have not told me whether I'm right.
Perfectly right, if people be right to marry only for the present. Now let us hear what you are unhappy about. Your brother'll be pleased. You'll escape from a disorderly, comfortless home into a wealthy, respectable one. And you love Edgar, and Edgar loves you. All seems smooth and easy. Now where's the obstacle?
Here, in my head, and here in my heart, in whichever place the soul lives. In my soul and in my heart, I'm convinced I'm wrong.
That's very strange. I cannot make it out.
It's my secret. But if you will not mock at me, I'll explain it. Nellie, do you ever dream strange dreams?
Well, yes, now and then.
If I were in heaven, Nellie, I should be extremely miserable.
Because you're not fit to go there. All sinners had been miserable in heaven.
But it is not for that. I dreamt once that I was there.
I tell you, I won't hearken to your dreams. I'll go to bed.
Oh, this is nothing. I was only going to say that heaven did not seem to be my home, and I broke my heart with weeping to come back to earth. And the angels were so angry that they flung me out into the middle of the heath, on top of Wuthering Heights, where I woke sobbing for joy. I've no more business to marry Edgar Linton than I have to be in heaven. And if my wicked brother had not brought Heathcliff so low, I shouldn't have thought of it. It would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how much I love him. And that, not because he's handsome, Nellie, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same. And Linton's is as different as a moonbeam from lightning or a frost from fire.
I became sensible of Heathcliff's presence. Having noticed a slight movement, I turned my head and saw him rise from the bench and steal out noiselessly. He'd listened till he heard Cathy say it'd degrade her to marry him, and then he stayed to hear no further. My companion was prevented by the back of the settle from remarking his presence or departure, but I started and made her hush.
Be quiet.
Why?
Joseph's here, and Heathcliff will come in with him. I'm not sure whether he were at the door this moment.
Oh, he couldn't overhear me at the door. Give me Hareton while you get the supper, and when it's ready, ask me to sup with you. I want to cheat my uncomfortable conscience and be convinced that Heathcliff has no notion of these things. He has not, has he? He does not know what love is.
I see no reason that he should not know as well as you. And if you are his choice, he'll be the most unfortunate creature that ever was born. As soon as you become Mrs. Linton, he loses friend and love and all. Now, have you ever considered how you'll bear the separation, and how he'll bear to be quite deserted in the world? Because Miss Cathy...
He quite deserted? We separated? Who is to separate us, pray? Not as long as I live, Ellen, for no mortal creature. Every Linton on the face of the earth might melt into nothing before I would consent to desert Heathcliff. Oh, that is not what I intend. That's not what I mean. He'll be as much to me as he has been all his lifetime. Edgar must shake off his antipathy and tolerate him at least. He will, when he learns my true feelings towards him. Nellie, I see now that you think me a selfish wretch. But did it never strike you that if Heathcliff and I married, we should be beggars? Whereas if I marry Linton, I can aid Heathcliff to rise and place him out of my brother's power.
Oh, with your husband's money, Miss Cathy? You'll find him not so pliable as you calculate upon. And though I'm hardly a judge, I think that's the worst motive you've given yet for being the wife of young Linton.
It is not. It is the best. The others were the satisfaction of my whims, and for Edgar's sake, too, to satisfy him. This is for the sake of one who comprehends in his person my feelings to Edgar and myself. My greatest miseries in this world have been Heathcliff's miseries, and I watched and felt each from the beginning. My great thought of living is himself. If all else perished and he remained, I should still continue to be, and if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn into a mighty stranger. Nellie, I am Heathcliff. He's always in my mind, not as a pleasure any more than I am always a pleasure to myself, but as my own being. So don't talk of our separation again. It is impractical, and...
Now, if I can make any sense out of your nonsense, miss, it only goes to convince me that you are ignorant of the duties you undertake in marrying, or else that you're a wicked, unprincipled girl. Now, but trouble me no more with secrets. I'll not promise to keep them. I whispered to Cathy that Heathcliff had heard a good part of what she'd said, and told how I saw him quit the kitchen just as she complained of her brother's conduct regarding him.
Oh, I wonder where he is. I wonder where he can be. What did I say, Nellie? Oh, I've forgotten. Was he vexed at my bad humour this afternoon? Oh, dear. Tell me what I've said to grieve him. I do wish he'd come. I do wish he would.
What a noise for nothing. What a trifle scares you. It's surely no great cause of alarm that Heathcliff should take a moonlight saunter on the moors, or even lie, too sulky to speak to us, in the hayloft. Huh! I'll engage his lurking there.
Heathcliff! Heathcliff!
Do goodness, Cathy! Cathy, you're not bent on getting near death, are you? You're drenched through. Now, come to bed. There's no use waiting any longer on that foolish boy. He'll be gone to Gimmerton, and he'll stay there now.
Having vainly begged the wilful girl to rise and remove her wet things, I left her shivering and betook myself to bed with little Ayrton. Coming down somewhat later than usual, I saw Miss Cathy still seated. Hindley had come out and stood on the kitchen hearth, haggard and drowsy.
Oh, what ails you, Cathy? You look as dismal as a drowned whelp. Why are you so damp and pale, child?
I've been wet and I'm cold. That's all, Hindley.
Oh, she is naughty. She got steeped in the shower of yesterday evening, and there she sat the night through, and I couldn't prevail on her to stir.
The night through? What kept her up? Not fear of the thunder, surely. It was over hours since.
I don't know how she took it in her head to sit up.
Ellen, don't open the window.
She's ill. I suppose that's the reason she would not go to bed. Damn it. I don't want to be troubled with any more sickness here.
Edgar Linton came yesterday by chance, Hindley, and it was I who told him to be off, because I knew that you would not like to have met him as you were.
You lie, Cathy, no doubt. And you are a confounded simpleton. But never mind Linton at present. Tell me, were you not with Heathcliff last night? Speak the truth now. You need not be afraid of harming him, though I hate him as much as ever.
I never saw Heathcliff last night. And if you do turn him out of doors, I'll go with him. But perhaps you'll never have the opportunity. Perhaps he's gone.
Up to your room, or you shall not cry for nothing.
I shall never forget what a scene she acted when we reached her chamber. It terrified me. I thought she was going mad. It proved the commencement of delirium. The doctor, as soon as he saw, pronounced her dangerously ill. She'd a fever. He bled her, and he told me to let her live on whey and water gruel, and take care that she did not throw herself downstairs or out the window. She weathered it through. Old Mrs. Linton paid us several visits, and when Cathy was convalescent, insisted on conveying her to Thrushcross Grange, for which deliverance we were very grateful. that the poor dame had reason to repent of her kindness. She and her husband both took the fever and died within a few days of each other. Heathcliff had never been heard of since the evening of the thunderstorm, and 3 years after the death of his father, Mr. Linton married Miss Cathy. I reluctantly accompanied them here, leaving Hareton at Wuthering Heights. Cathy behaved much better than I dared to expect on her marriage. She seemed over-fond of Mr. Linton, and even to his sister she showed plenty of affection. I observed that Mr. Edgar had a deep-rooted fear of ruffling her humour. Cathy had periods of gloom and silence now and then. They were respected with sympathetic silence by her husband. I believe I may assert that they had a deep and growing happiness. Well, it ended. On a mellow evening in September, I was coming at dusk from the orchard. Something stirred in the porch. I then distinguished a tall man dressed in dark clothes, with dark hair and face.
Nellie, is that you? I have waited here an hour, and the whole of that time I've been as still as death. I dared not enter.
What?
You do not know me? Look, I'm not a stranger.
What? You come back? Is it really you? Is it?
Yes, Heathcliff. Where is she? Nellie, are you not glad? You needn't be so disturbed. Is she here? Speak. I want to have one word with her, your mistress. Go and say that some person from Gimmerton desires to see her.
How will she take it? What'll she do? The surprise bewilders me. It'll put her out of her head. And you are Heathcliff. But altered. There's no comprehending it. Have you been for a soldier?
Go and carry my message. I'm in hell till you do.
Who is it, Nellie?
Someone mistress does not expect. That Heathcliff, Master Edgar. You recollect him, sir. Used to live at Mr. Earnshaw's.
What? The gypsy? The ploughboy? Why did you not say so to Cathy?
Hush! You must not call him by those names, Master. She'd be sadly grieved to hear you. She was nearly heartbroken when he ran off. Oh, I guess his return will make a jubilee to her.
Don't stand there, love. Bring the person in, if it be anyone particular.
Oh, Edgar, darling. Heathcliff's come back.
Well, don't strangle me for that. He never struck me as such a marvellous treasure. There is no need to be frantic.
I know you didn't like him, yet for my sake you must be friends now. Shall I tell him to come up?
Here? Into the parlour?
Where else?
I should have thought the kitchen to be a more suitable place for him.
No, I cannot sit in the kitchen.
Set 2 tables here, Ellen. One for your master and Miss Isabella, being gentry. The other for Heathcliff and myself, being of the lower orders. Will that please you, dear? Or must I have a fire lighted elsewhere? If so, give directions. I'll run downstairs and secure my guest. I'm afraid the joy is too great to be real.
Mrs. Dean will bid him step up. And Cathy, try to be glad without being absurd. The whole household need not witness the sight of your welcoming a runaway servant as a brother.
I descended and found Heathcliff evidently waiting for an invitation to enter. As he entered, my master's and mistress's flushed cheeks betrayed signs of warm talking, but the ladies glowed with another feeling when her friend appeared at the door. She sprang forward, took both his hands, and led him to Linton. And then she seized Linton's reluctant fingers and crushed them into his. Now, fully revealed by the fire and candlelight, I was amazed to behold the transformation of Heathcliff. He'd grown a tall, athletic, well-formed man, beside whom my master seemed quite slender and youth-like. His countenance was much older in expression than Mr. Linton's. He retained no marks of former degradation. A half-civilized ferocity lurked yet in the depressed brows and eyes full of black fire, but it was subdued, and his manner was even dignified, quite divested of roughness, though too stern for grace. Mr. Linton seemed at a loss as how to address the ploughboy, as he'd called him. He welcomed Heathcliff, saying that he was always gratified to please his wife. Heathcliff took a seat opposite Cathy, who kept her gaze on him as if she feared he'd vanish if she were to remove it. He did not raise his to hers often. A quick glance now and then sufficed, but it flashed back, each time more confidently, the undisguised delight he drank from hers. They were much too absorbed in their mutual joy to suffer embarrassment.
Oh, I shall think it a dream tomorrow. I shall not be able to believe that I have seen and touched and spoken to you once more. And yet, cruel Heathcliff, you don't deserve this welcome. To be absent and silent for 3 years and never to think of me.
A little more than you thought of me. I heard of your marriage, Cathy, not long since, and hoped to have a glimpse of your face. A stare of surprise, perhaps, and pretended pleasure. I then intended to settle my score with Hindley, and afterwards evade the law by doing execution on myself. Your welcome has put these ideas out of my mind. But beware of seeing me with another aspect next time. Nay, you'll not drive me off again. So, you were really sorry for me, were you? You had good cause. I fought through a bitter life alone since I last heard your voice. And you must forgive me. For I struggled only for you.
Cathy, unless we are to have cold tea, please come to the table. Mr. Heathcliff will have a long walk wherever he may lodge tonight, and I'm thirsty.
Are you going to Gimmerton?
No, to Wuthering Heights. Your kind brother, Mr. Hindley Earnshaw, invited me when I called this morning.
Mr. Earnshaw invited him, and he called on Mr. Earnshaw. I pondered this sentence painfully after he'd gone. What mischief was he planning? How had he urged an invitation? I had a presentiment that it would have been better if he'd never returned. About the middle of the night, I was awakened from my first nap by Mrs. Linton gliding into my chamber. She took a seat on my bedside and pulled me by the hair to rouse me.
I cannot rest, Ellen. I want some living creature to keep me company in my happiness. Edgar is sulky, because I'm glad of a thing that does not interest him. He refuses to open his mouth, except to utter pettish, silly speeches. And he affirmed I was cruel and selfish for wishing to talk when he was so sick and sleepy. Huh. He always contrives to be sick at the least cross. I gave a few sentences of commendation to Heathcliff, and he, either for a headache or a pang of envy, began to cry. So I got up and left him.
What use is it praising Heathcliff to him? As lads they had an aversion to each other, and Heathcliff would hate just as much to hear him praised. It's human nature. Now let Mr. Linton alone about him, unless you'd like an open quarrel between them.
But does it not show great weakness? I'm not envious. I never feel hurt at the brightness of Isabella's yellow hair and the whiteness of her skin, at her dainty elegance, and the fondness all the family exhibit for her, even you, Nellie. If we have a dispute, sometimes you back Isabella at once, and I yield like a foolish mother. I call her a darling, and flatter her into a good temper. It pleases her brother to see us cordial, and that pleases me. But they are very much alike. They are spoiled children, and fancy the world was made for them and their accommodation. And though I humour both, I think a sharp chastisement might improve them all the same.
You're mistaken, Mrs. Linton. They humour you by anticipating all your desires. Were you to fall out over something of equal consequence to both sides, then those you term weak are very capable of being as obstinate as you.
And then we shall fight to the death, shan't we, Nellie? No. I tell you, I have such faith in Linton's love that I believe I might kill him, and he wouldn't wish to retaliate.
All the more reason to value him for his affection.
I do, but he needn't resort to whining for trifles. It's childish. And instead of melting into tears because I said that Heathcliff was now worthy of anyone's regard, and it would honour the first gentleman in the country to be his friend, he ought to have said it for me and been delighted for sympathy. He must get accustomed to him, and he may as well like him. Considering how Heathcliff has reason to object to him, I'm sure he behaved excellently.
What do you think of Heathcliff staying at Wuthering Heights? Have you no fear of the consequences?
Oh, none for Heathcliff. As for Hindley, he cannot be made any morally worse than he is already. And I stand between him and any bodily harm. Heathcliff's return has reconciled me to God and humanity. I have risen in angry rebellion against Providence. If that creature knew how bitter, he'd be ashamed to cloud its removal with idle petulance. It was kindness for him which induced me to bear it alone. However, it's over, and I'll take no revenge on his folly. I can afford to suffer anything hereafter. Should the meanest thing alive slap me on the cheek, I'd not only turn the other, but I'd ask pardon for it. And as a proof, I'll go make my peace with Edgar instantly. Good night, Nellie. I'm an angel.
In this self-complacent mood, Cathy departed, and the success of her fulfilled resolution was obvious on the morrow. Mr. Linton had not only abjured his peevishness, though his spirit seemed still subdued by Cathy's exuberance of vivacity, but he ventured no objection to her taking Isabella with her to Wuthering Heights in the afternoon, and she rewarded him with such... Heathcliff explained to Cathy that he'd called there to enquire after her, and had been invited in to play at cards. Hindley lost heavily to him, and Heathcliff offered him liberal payment to lodge there. Mr. Earnshaw were always greedy and too reckless to select his acquaintance prudently. He didn't trouble himself to reflect on the causes he might have for mistrusting one he'd basely injured. Heathcliff used the liberty of visiting at Thrushcross Grange cautiously at first. My master's uneasiness experienced a lull, and further circumstances diverted it into another channel. His new source of trouble sprang from Isabella showing a sudden and irresistible attraction towards the tolerated guest. He knew that although Heathcliff's exterior was altered, his mind was unchangeable and unchanged, and he dreaded that mind. It revolted him. He mistakenly laid the blame on Heathcliff's deliberate designing. Cathy was filled with disbelief and a kind of pity.
Nellie, help me convince Isabella of her madness. Tell her what Heathcliff is. An unreclaimed creature, without refinement or cultivation. An arid wilderness of furs and whinstone. He's not a rough diamond. He's a fierce, pitiless, wolfish man. I know he could never love a Linton. And yet, he'd be quite capable of marrying your fortune and expectations.
For shame! For shame! You are worse than 20 foes, you poisonous friend!
Ah, you won't believe me then? You think I speak from wicked selfishness?
I'm certain you do, and I shudder at you.
Then you must take your own course. I have done.
Mr. Heathcliff isn't a fiend, is he, Mrs. Dean? He has an honourable soul and a true one. Or how could he remember her?
Banish him from your thoughts, Miss Linton. He's a bird of ill omen.
You are leagued with the rest, Ellen. I'll not listen to your slanders. What malevolence you must have to wish to convince me that there is no happiness in the world.
Whether she would have got over this fancy if left to herself, I cannot say. Heathcliff called rather earlier than usual the next day, aware that Mr. Edgar was away. Cathy and Isabella were sitting in the library, on hostile terms but silent, the latter alarmed at her recent indiscretion, the former, on mature consideration, really offended with her companion. Then she smiled mischievously as the door opened.
Come in, that's right. Here are two people sadly in need of a third to thaw the ice between them. And you are the very one we both of us choose.
Indeed.
Heathcliff, I'm proud to show you, at last, someone who dotes on you more than myself. I expect you to feel flattered. My poor little sister-in-law is breaking her heart by a mere contemplation of your physical and moral beauty. It lies in your power to be Edgar's brother. No, Isabella, you shan't run off. We were quarrelling like cats about you, Heathcliff, and I was fairly beaten in protestations of devotion and admiration. If I would but stand aside, my rival, as she will have herself be, would shoot a shaft into your soul that would fix you forever and send my image into eternal oblivion.
I thank you to adhere to the truth and not slander me even in joke. Mr. Heathcliff, be kind enough to bid this friend of yours release me. She forgets that you and I are not intimate acquaintances. What amuses her is painful to me beyond expression.
There's a tigress. Begone, for God's sake, and hide your vixen face. Oh, how foolish to reveal those talons to him. Can't you fancy the conclusions he'll draw? Look, Heathcliff. Her nails are instruments that will do execution. You must beware of your eyes.
I'd wrench them off her fingers if they ever menaced me. But what do you mean by teasing the creature in that manner, Cathy? You were not speaking the truth, were you?
She has been dying for your sake several weeks. She has been pouring forth a deluge of abuse because I represented your feelings in a plain light to mitigate her adoration. But don't notice it further. I wish to punish her sauciness, that's all. I like her too well, my dear Heathcliff, to let you absolutely seize and devour her up.
And I like her too ill to attempt it. Except in a very ghoulish fashion. You'd hear of some odd things if I lived with that mawkish, waxen face. The most ordinary would be painting on its white the colours of the rainbow, and turning the blue eyes black every day or two. They detestably resemble Linton's.
Delectably? They are dove's eyes. Angels.
She's her brother's heir, is she not?
I should be sorry to think so. Half a dozen nephews shall erase her title, please heaven. Abstract your mind from the subject at present. You are too prone to covet your neighbour's goods. Remember, this neighbour's goods are mine.
If they were mine, they would be none the less so. But though Isabella Linton may be silly, she is scarcely mad.
From their tongues they did dismiss it, and Cathy probably from her thoughts. The other, I felt certain, recalled it often in the course of the evening. I saw him smile to himself, grin rather, and lapse into ominous musing whenever Mrs. Linton had occasion to leave the room. I determined to watch his movements. My heart invariably cleaved to the master's in preference to Cathy's side. He was kind and trustful and honourable, and she could not be called the opposite. Yet she allowed herself, such wide latitude that I had little faith in her principles and still less sympathy for her feelings. I wanted something to happen which might have the effect of freeing both Wuthering Heights and the Grange of Mr. Heathcliff, quietly, leaving us as we'd been before his arrival. The next time he came, Isabella chanced to be in the garden, and the scoundrel had the impudence to embrace her. "Your worthless friend, the sneaking rascal yonder. Oh, caught a glimpse of us. He's coming in. I wonder will he have it in his heart to find a plausible excuse for making love to Miss when he told you he hated her."
Be quiet, Ellen. I shall send you to the kitchen if you dare to be so presumptuous as to put in your insolent tongue. To hear you, people might think you were the mistress. Heathcliff, what are you about? I said you must leave Isabella alone. I beg you will, unless you are tired of being received here and wish Linton to draw the bolts against you.
God forbid that he should try. God keep him meek and patient. Every day I grow madder to send him to heaven.
Hush, don't vex me. Why have you disregarded my request? Did she come across you on purpose?
What is it to you? I've a right to kiss her if she chooses, and you've no right to object. I am not your husband. You needn't be jealous of me.
I'm not jealous of you. I'm jealous for you. Clear your face. You shan't scowl at me. If you like Isabella, you shall marry her. But do you like her? Tell the truth, Heathcliff. There. You won't answer. I'm certain you don't.
And would Mr. Linton approve of his sister marrying that man?
Mr. Linton should approve.
He might spare himself the trouble. I could do without his approbation. And as to you, Cathy, I have a mind to speak a few words now whilst we are at it. I want you to be aware that I know you have treated me infernally. And if you flatter yourself that I don't perceive it, you are a fool. And if you can think I can be consoled by sweet words, you are an idiot. And if you fancy I'll suffer unrevenged, I'll convince you to the contrary in a very little while. Meantime, thank you for telling me your sister-in-law's secret. I swear I'll make the most of it. And stand you aside!
Oh, what new phase of his character is this? I've treated you infernally, and you'll take your revenge. How will you take it, ungrateful brute? How have I treated you infernally?
I seek no revenge on you. That's not the plan. You are welcome to torture me to death for your amusement. Only allow me to amuse myself a little in the same style, and refrain from insult as much as you are able. If I imagined you really wished me to marry Isabel, I'd cut my own throat.
Oh, the evil is that I am not jealous, is it? Well, I won't repeat my offer of a wife. It is as bad as offering Satan a lost soul. Your bliss lies like his in inflicting misery. You prove it. Edgar is restored from the ill temper he gave way to at your coming. I begin to be secure and tranquil. And you, restless to find us at peace, appear resolved on exciting a quarrel. Quarrel with Edgar, if you please, Heathcliff, and deceive his sister. You've hit on exactly the best way of revenging yourself on me.
Mrs. Linton sat down by the fire, flushed and gloomy. The spirit which served her was growing intractable. She could neither lay nor control it. He stood on the hearth with folded arms, brooding on his evil thoughts, and in this position I left them to seek the master, who was wondering what kept Cathy below so long. I related the scene, and as near as I dared, the whole subsequent dispute. Edgar Linton had difficulty in hearing me to the close. His first words revealed he did not clear his wife of blame.
This is insufferable. It is disgraceful that she should own him for a friend, and force his company on me. Cathy shall linger no longer to argue with that low ruffian. I have humoured her enough. James, Arthur, wait there in the passage. How is this, Cathy? What notion of propriety must you have to remain here, after the language which has been held to you by that blackguard? I have so far been forbearing with you, sir. Not that I was ignorant of your miserable, degraded character, but I felt you were only partly responsible for that. And Cathy, wishing to keep up your acquaintance, I acquiesced. Foolishly. Your presence is a moral poison that would contaminate the most virtuous. For that cause, and to prevent worse consequences, I shall deny you hereafter admission into this house, and give notice that I require your instant departure. 3 minutes' delay will render it involuntary and ignominious.
Cathy, this lamb of yours threatens like a bull. It is in danger of splitting its skull against my knuckles. By God, Mr. Linton, I'm mortally sorry that you are not worth knocking down.
If you haven't the courage to attack him, Edgar, make him an apology or allow yourself to be beaten. It will correct you of feigning more valor than you possess. No! I'll swallow the key before you shall get it. I'm delightfully rewarded for my kindness to each of you. After constant indulgence of one's weak nature and the other's bad one, I earn for thanks 2 samples of blind ingratitude, stupid to absurdity. Edgar, I was defending you and yours, and I wish Heathcliff may flog you sick for daring to think an evil thought of me.
Give me the key!
Oh, heavens! In old days, this would win you a knighthood. We are vanquished. We are vanquished. Heathcliff would as soon lift a finger at you as the king would march his army against a colony of mice. Cheer up. You shan't be hurt. Your type is not a lamb, it's a sucking leveret.
I wish you joy of the milk-blooded coward, Cathy. I compliment you on your taste. And that is the slavering, shivering thing you prefer to me? Is he weeping? Or is he going to faint with fear?
Ah! Master's hit Heathcliff!
There, Heathcliff, you've done with coming here. Get away now. Edgar will return with a brace of pistols and half a dozen assistants. If he did overhear us, he'll never forgive you. Oh, you've played an ill turn on me, Heathcliff. But go, make haste. I'd rather see Edgar at bay than you.
Do you suppose I'm going with that blow he gave me burning in my gullet? By hell, no! I'll crush his ribs like a rotten hazelnut before I cross the threshold. If I don't floor him now, I shall murder him at some time. So, as you value his existence, let me get at him.
There's the coachman and 2 gardeners. You'll surely not wait to be thrust into the road by them. Each has a bludgeon, and Master will very likely be watching from parlour windows to see them fulfil his orders. What?
Give me the poker, Nellie.
thousand smiths' hammers are beating in my head. Tell Isabella to shun me, and should she or anyone else aggravate my anger at present, oh, I shall get wild.
Have some water, Miss Cathy.
And Nellie, say to Edgar, if you see him again tonight, that I'm in danger of being seriously ill. I wish it may prove true. He has startled and distressed me shockingly. Heathcliff's talk was outrageous after you left us, but I could have soon diverted him from Isabella, and the rest meant nothing. Really, when he opened up on me in that unreasonable tone of displeasure after I had scolded Heathcliff till I was hoarse for him, oh, I did not care what they did to one another.
Pray calm yourself.
Well, if I cannot keep Heathcliff as my friend, if Edgar will be mean and jealous, I'll try to break their hearts by breaking my own. I wish you would take that apathy out of that countenance and look rather more anxious about me. Well, go.
Remain where you are, Cathy. I shall not stay. I am neither come to wrangle nor to be reconciled. But I wish just to learn whether you intend to continue your intimacy with...
Oh, for mercy's sake! Let us hear no more of it now. Your cold blood cannot be worked into a fever. Your veins are full of ice water, but mine are boiling, and the sight of such chillness makes them dance.
But to get rid of me, answer my question. You must answer it. And that violence does not alarm me. I have found you can be as stoical as anyone when you please. Will you give up Heathcliff hereafter, or will you give up me? It is impossible for you to be my friend and his at the same time, and I absolutely require to know which you choose.
And I require to be left alone! I demand it! Oh, can't you see I can hardly stand? Edgar, you... Oh, leave me!
I entered leisurely. It was enough to try the patience of a saint, such senseless, wicked rages. There she lay, dashing her head against the arm of the sofa and grinding her teeth so that you might fancy she'd crush them to splinters. Mr. Linton stood looking at her in sudden compunction and fear. She'd no breath for speaking. I sprinkled some water on her face. In a few seconds she stretched herself out stiff and turned up her eyes, while her cheeks, at once blanched and livid, assumed the aspect of death. She'd blood on her lips. I told Mr. Linton how the mistress had decided to act out a fit of frenzy, and at this she started up, her hair flying over her shoulders, her eyes flashing, the muscles of her arms and neck standing out. I made up my mind for broken bones at least, but she only glared about her for an instant and then rushed from the room.
Ellen, is your mistress not coming down today?
No, Mr. Edgar, sir. I'll offer to carry something up for her.
Where is Miss Isabella?
She's in the garden, sir.
Please ask her to come to me in the library.
Yes, master.
I fear for her, Ellen. It would be a degradation for her to form an alliance with any illegitimate, but she can have no comprehension of that villain Heathcliff's nature.
Mr. Linton had an hour's interview with Isabella, but could get nothing from her about Heathcliff's advances. He solemnly warned her that if she were so insane as to encourage that worthless suitor, it'd destroy all bonds between them. She moped about in the garden, always silent and almost always in tears, and her brother shut himself up among his unopened books with a continual vague expectation that Cathy, repenting her conduct, would come of her own accord to ask pardon. On the third day, Mrs. Linton unbarred her door, and having finished the water in her pitcher and decanter, desired a renewed supply and a basin of gruel, for she believed that she was dying. That I set down as a speech meant for Edgar's ears. I believed no such thing, so I kept it to myself and brought her some tea and dry toast. Cathy's hair hung round her wasted face in thick, entangled locks.
Oh, I will die, since no one cares anything about me. I wish I had not eaten that. No, I'll not die. He'd be so glad. He does not love me at all. He would never miss me. What is that apathetic creature doing? Has he fallen into a lethargy, or is he dead?
Neither, if you mean Mr. Linton. He's tolerably well, I think, though his studies occupy him rather more than they ought. He's continually among his books, since he has no other society.
Among his books? And I, dying? I, on the brink of the grave? My God, does he know how I'm altered? Look at me, Nellie. Is this Catherine Linton? He imagines me in a pet, in play, perhaps. Cannot you inform him that it is frightful earnest? Are you speaking the truth about him now? Take care. Is he actually so utterly indifferent for my life?
Why, ma'am, the master has no idea of your being deranged.
If I were only sure that it would kill him, I'd kill myself directly. These 3 awful nights I've never closed my lids. And oh, I've been tormented. How strange. I thought Though everybody hated and despised each other, they could not avoid loving me. And they have all turned into enemies in a few hours. They have. I'm positive. The people here. Oh, how dreary to meet death surrounded by their cold faces. Isabella, terrified and appalled, afraid to enter the room. It would be so dreadful to watch Cathy go. And Edgar, standing solemnly by to see it over, then offering prayers of thanks to God for restoring peace to his house and going back to his books. What in the name of all that feels has he to do with books when I am dying?
She could not bear the notion which I'd put in her head of Mr. Linton's calm acceptance. Tossing about, she increased her feverish bewilderment to madness and tore the pillow with her teeth. Then, raising herself up all burning, desired that I would open the window. We were in the middle of winter. The wind blew strong from the northeast, and I objected. Both the expressions flitting over her face and the changes of her moods began to alarm me terribly, and brought to my recollection her former illness and the doctor's injunction that she should not be crossed. A minute previously she was violent. Now, supported on one arm, and not noticing my refusal to obey her, she seemed to find childish diversion in pulling the feathers from the rents she'd just made, and ranging them on the sheets, according to the different birds. Her mind had strayed to other associations.
That's a turkey's, and this is a wild duck's, and this is a pigeon's. Ah, they put pigeon feathers in the pillows. No wonder I couldn't die. Let me take care to throw it on the floor when I lie down. And here's a moorcock's. And this. I should know it among 1,000. It's a lapwing's. Bonny bird, wheeling over our heads in the middle of the moor. We saw its nest in the winter, full of little skeletons. Heathcliff set a trap over it, and the old ones dared not come. I made him promise he'd never shoot a lapwing after that, and he didn't. Yes, here are more. Did he shoot my lapwings, Nellie? Are they red, any of them? Let me look.
Give over with that baby work. Lie down and shut your eyes. You're wandering. There's a mess. Down is flying about like snow.
I'm not wandering. I'm conscious it's night, and there are 2 candles on the table, making the black press shine like jet.
The black press? Where's that? You're talking in your sleep.
It's against the wall, as it always is. It does appear odd. I see a face in it.
No, there's no press in the room and never was.
Don't you see that face?
It's your own reflection in
No.
the mirror.
No! Who is it? Oh, I hope it would not come out when you were gone. Oh, Nellie! The room is haunted. I'm afraid of being alone.
There's nobody here. It was yourself, Mrs. Linton.
Myself?
That's the glass, the mirror, Mrs. Linton. And you see yourself in it. And there I am, too, by your side.
Oh, dear. Oh, I thought I was at home. I thought I was lying in my chamber at Wuthering Heights. Because I'm weak, my brain got confused and I screamed unconsciously. Don't say anything. Stay with me. I dread sleeping. My dreams appall me.
A sound sleep 'ud do you good, Mum. And I hope this suffering will prevent your trying starving again.
Oh, if I were but in my own bed in the old house. And that wind sounding in the firs by the lattice. Since I shut myself in here.
It was Monday evening, and this is Thursday night, or rather Friday morning at present.
What? Of the same week? Only that brief time?
Long enough to live on nothing but cold water and ill temper.
I remember being in the parlour after they quarrelled, and Edgar being cruelly provoking, and me running into this room desperate. As soon as ever I had barred the door, utter blackness overcame me, and I fell to the floor. I couldn't explain to Edgar how certain I felt of having a fit or going raging mad if he persisted in teasing me. I had no command of tongue or brain, and he did not guess my agony, perhaps. It barely left me sense to try to escape from him and his voice. Before I recovered sufficiently to see and hear, it began to dawn. And Nellie, I'll tell you what I thought and what has kept recurring and recurring till I feared for my reason. I thought as I lay there with my head against that table leg and my eyes dimly discerning the grey square of the window that I was enclosed in the oak-panelled bed at home, and my heart ached with some great grief, which just waking I could not recollect. I pondered and worried to myself to discover what it could be, and most strangely, the whole last 7 years of my life grew blank. I was a child, my father was just buried, and my misery arose from the separation that Hindley had ordered between me and Heathcliff. I cannot say why I felt so wildly wretched. It must have been temporary derangement. Oh, you may fancy a glimpse of the abyss where I grovelled. Oh,
Cathy, Cathy!
Oh, let me go!
I was fortunate to meet Dr. Kenneth just issuing from his house to see a patient in the village, and my account of Mrs. Linton's malady induced him to accompany me back immediately. He was a plain, rough man, and he made no scruple to speak of her surviving a second attack. Cathy lay in a troubled sleep. Her husband had succeeded in soothing the excessive frenzy, and he now hung over her pillow, watching every shade and change of her painfully expressive features. The doctor spoke hopefully to him. I never closed my eyes that night, nor did Mr. Linton. In the morning he was impatient for Isabella's presence, and was hurt that she showed so little concern for her sister-in-law. Then Mary, her maid, rushed up the stairs, shouting that her lady had gone. I should tell you, Mr. Linton, that I have received a letter from Miss Isabella... Mrs. Heathcliff. Oh, sir, not 6 weeks married, and she's so miserable. Will you not forgive us, sir?
Forgiveness? I have nothing to forgive her, Ellen. You may visit her at Wuthering Heights if you wish, and say that I am not angry, but sorry to have lost her.
Won't you write her a little note, sir?
No, it is needless. My communication with Heathcliff's family shall be as sparing as his with mine. It shall not exist.
If you have anything for Isabella, as no doubt you have, you may give it to her. You needn't make a secret of it. We have no secrets between us.
Oh, I've nothing, Mr. Heathcliff. My master bid me tell his sister that she must not expect either a letter or a visit from him. Sends his love, ma'am, and his wishes for your happiness, and his pardon for the grief you have occasioned. But he thinks that after this time his household and the household here should drop into communication, as nothing would come of keeping it up, ma'am, but nothing else.
Oh, Nellie.
How is Cathy, Nellie?
Mrs. Linton has been gravely ill, and is now just recovering. She'll never be like she was, but her life is spared, and if you have any regard for her, you'll shun crossing her way again. And that you may not regret it, I'll inform you Cathy Linton is as different now from your old friend Cathy Earnshaw as that young lady is different from me. Her appearance is changed greatly, her character much more so, and the person who is compelled of necessity to be her companion will only sustain his affection hereafter by the remembrance of what she once was, by common humanity and a sense of duty.
That is quite possible. Quite possible that your master should have nothing but common humanity and a sense of duty to fall back upon. But do you imagine that I shall leave Cathy to his duty and humanity? And can you compare my feelings respecting Cathy to his? Before you leave this house, I must extract a promise from you that you'll get me an interview with her. Consent or refuse, I will see her.
Mr. Heathcliff, you must not. You never shall through my means. An encounter between you and the master would kill her.
With your aid, that may be avoided. And should there be a danger of such an event, should he be the cause of adding a single trouble more to her existence, why, I think I should be justified in going to extremes. I wish you had sincerity enough to tell me whether Cathy would suffer greatly at his loss. The fear that she would restrain me. And there you see the distinction between our feelings. Had he been in my place, and I in his, though I hated him with a hatred that turned my life to gall, I never would have raised a hand against him. You may look incredulous, if you please. I never would have banished him from her society as long as she desired his. The moment her regard ceased, I would have torn his heart out and drunk his blood. But till then, if you don't believe me, you don't know me. Till then, I would have died by inches before I touched a hair of his head.
And yet you have no scruples in completely ruining all hopes of her perfect restoration by thrusting yourself into her remembrance now, when she's nearly forgotten you, and involving her in a new tumult of discord and distress.
You suppose she has nearly forgotten me? Oh, Nellie, you know she has not. You know as well as I do that for every thought she spends on Linton, she spends 1,000 on me. Few words would comprehend my future. Death and hell. Existence after losing her would be hell. Yet I was a fool to fancy for a moment that she valued Edgar Linton's attachment more than mine. If he loved with all the powers of his puny being, he couldn't love as much in 80 years as I could in a day. And Cathy has a heart as deep as mine. He is scarcely a degree dearer to her than her dog or her horse. It is not in him to be loved like me. How can she love in him what he has not?
Cathy and Edgar are as fond of each other as any two people can be. No one has a right to talk in that manner, and I won't hear my brother depreciated in silence.
Your brother is wondrously fond of you too, isn't he? He turns you adrift on the world with surprising alacrity.
He is not aware of what I suffer. I didn't tell him that.
Nor is he aware that you have degenerated into a slut.
Oh!
She is tired of trying to please me uncommonly early. You'd hardly credit it, but the very morrow of our wedding she was weeping to go home. However, she'll suit this house the better for not being over-nice. And I'll take care she doesn't disgrace me by rambling abroad.
Well, sir, I hope you'll consider that your wife is accustomed to being looked after. You should treat her kindly. Whatever be your notion of Mr. Edgar, you cannot doubt she has a capacity for strong attachment, so she wouldn't have abandoned the elegancies and comforts and friends of her former home to fix contentedly in such a wilderness as this with you.
She abandoned them under a delusion, picturing in me a hero of romance.
Oh, Heathcliff!
I think she has come to know me now, and to realize that I never loved her. This morning she asserted that I had succeeded in making her hate me. Can I trust your assertion, Isabella? If I left you alone for half a day, won't you come sighing and wheedling to me again? And what's more, she'd thank nobody for dividing us. If she desired to go, she might. The nuisance of her presence outweighs the gratification to be derived from tormenting her.
Mr. Heathcliff, this is the talk of a madman. But now that you've given her permission to go, she'll doubtless avail herself of that offer.
Take care, Ellen. Don't put faith in a single word he speaks.
Get upstairs, woman! I have something to say to Ellen Dean in private. Upstairs, I said! I have no pity. I have no pity. The more the worms writhe, the more I yearn to crush out their entrails.
In the long run, Mr. Heathcliff forced me to agree to give him intelligence of Linton's next absence from home. Mrs. Linton and Mr. Heathcliff met 3 days later on a Sunday after the master had gone to church. I'd had to read her Mr. Heathcliff's letter. She was sitting in a loose white dress with a light shawl over her shoulders, in the recess of the open window as usual. Her thick, long hair had been partly removed at the beginning of her illness, and now she wore it simply combed in its natural tresses over her temples and neck. Her appearance was altered, as at told Heathcliff. But, oh, when she was calm, there seemed unearthly beauty in the change. The flash of her eyes had been succeeded by a dreamy and melancholy softness. She bent forward and listened breathlessly, gazing towards the entrance of her chamber with straining eagerness as Heathcliff walked into the house. Before I could reach the door, he opened it and was at her side and had her grasped in his arms. He neither spoke nor loosed his hold for 5 minutes, whilst he bestowed more kisses than he ever gave in his life before, I dare say. Oh, but then my mistress had kissed him first, and I plainly saw that he could hardly bear for downright agony to look into her face. Oh, the same conviction had stricken him as me from the instant he beheld her, that there was no prospect of ultimate recovery there. She was fated, sure to die.
What now? You and Edgar have broken my heart, Heathcliff. And you both come to bewail the deed to me, as if you were the people to be pitied. I shall not pity you. Not I. You have killed me, and thriven on it, I think. How strong you are! How many years do you mean to live after I am gone? Oh, I wish I could hold you till we were both dead. Will you forget me? Will you be happy when I am in the earth? Will you say 20 years hence? That's the grave of Catherine Earnshaw. I loved her long ago, and was wretched to lose her. But it is past. I have loved many others since. My children are dearer to me than she was. And at death I shall not rejoice that I am going to her. I shall be sorry that I must leave them. Will you say so, Heathcliff?
Don't torture me till I'm as mad as yourself. Are you possessed with a devil to talk in that manner to me when you are dying? Do you reflect that all these words will be branded in my memory and eating deeper eternally after you have left me? You know you lie when you say that I have killed you. And, Cathy, you know I could as soon forget you as my existence. Is it not sufficient for your infernal selfishness that while you are at peace, I shall writhe in the torments of hell?
I shall not be at peace. I'm not wishing you greater torment than I have, Heathcliff. I only wish us never to be parted. And should a word of mine distress you hereafter, think I feel the same distress underground. And for my own sake, forgive me. You never harmed me in your life. Nay, if you nurse anger, that will be worse to remember than my harsh words.
Why did you despise me? Why did you betray your own heart, Cathy? I have not one word of comfort. You deserve this. You have killed yourself. Yes, you may kiss me and cry, and wring out my kisses and tears. They'll blight you. They'll damn you. You loved me. In what right had you to leave me? What right? Answer me! For the poor fancy you felt for Linton. I have not broken your heart. You have broken it. And in breaking it, you have broken mine. So much the worse for me that I am strong. Do I want to live? What kind of living will it be when you... Oh, God! Would you like to live with your soul in the grave?
Let me alone. Let me alone. If I have done wrong, I am dying for it. It is enough. You left me too, but I won't upbraid you. I forgive you. Forgive me.
It is hard to forgive. And to look into those eyes. Kiss me again. I forgive.
Heathcliff wrenched his head free and ground his teeth. I wrung my hands and cried out, and Mr. Linton hastened his step. In the midst of my agitation, I was sincerely glad to observe that Cathy's arms had fallen relaxed and her head hung down. She's fainted or dead, I thought. So much the better. Far better that she should be dead than lingering a burden and a misery maker to all about her. Edgar sprang at his unbidden guest, blanched with astonishment and rage. What he meant to do I cannot tell. However, the other stopped all demonstrations at once by placing the lifeless-looking form in his arms.
Was she dead?
We managed to restore her to sensation, but she was all bewildered. She sighed and moaned. Edgar, in his anxiety for her, forgot her hated friend. I did not. I sought him out at the earliest opportunity and besought him to depart, affirming that Cathy was better and he should hear from me in the morning how she passed the night. He went into the garden, where he took up his post under the large trees. About 12 o'clock that night was born the Catherine you saw at Wuthering Heights, a puny 7-month child, and 2 hours after the mother died, never having recovered consciousness either to miss Heathcliff or know Edgar. Oh, an unwelcome infant it was, poor thing. We redeemed the neglect afterwards, but its beginning was as friendless as its end is likely to be.
I've not waited for you to learn that. Oh, put your handkerchief away. Don't snivel before me. Damn you all! She wants none of your tears.
Yes, she's dead, Mr. Heathcliff. Gone to heaven, I hope, where we may everyone join her if we take due warning and leave our evil ways to follow good.
Did she take due warning, then? Did she die like a saint? Or may she wake in torment? Why, She's a liar to the end. Where is she? Not there. Not in heaven. Not perished. Where? You said you cared nothing for my sufferings. And I pray one prayer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Cathy Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then. I know the ghosts have walked the earth. Be with me always. Take any form. Drive me mad. Only do not leave me in this abyss where I cannot find you. Oh God, it is unutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul. Go!
As he dashed his head against the knotted trunk, he howled like a savage beast, his hand and forehead stained with blood. He hardly moved my compassion. He appalled me. Yet I took pity on his vigil during the time when Mrs. Linton's uncovered coffin, strewn with flowers, remained in the great drawing-room. The wind brought rain first, and then sleet and snow. The primroses and crocuses were hidden under winter drifts. The larks were silent, the young leaves of the early trees smitten and blackened. My master kept to his room. I took possession of the lonely parlour, converting it into a nursery. Have done! How dare you show your giddiness here? Now, what did Mr. Linton say if he heard you, Mistress Isabella?
Excuse me, but I know Edgar is in bed, and I cannot stop myself.
Well,
I have run the whole way from Wuthering Heights, except where I have flown.
Just stop.
I couldn't count the number of falls I have had. I'm aching all over. Don't be alarmed. Only have the goodness to order the carriage to take me on to Gimmerton. And tell Mary to seek up a few clothes in my wardrobe, please, Nellie.
My dear young lady, I'll stay nowhere and hear nothing till you've removed every article of your clothes and put on some dry things. And certainly you shall not go to Gimmerton tonight, so it's needless to order the carriage. In my first fright, I'd not had leisure to observe her. She was dressed in the girlish dress she commonly wore, befitting her age more than her position. The frock was of light silk and clung to her with wet. There was a deep cut under one ear, which only the cold prevented from bleeding profusely. Her white face was scratched and bruised.
You mustn't think that I did not care for Cathy because I behaved so foolishly on entering. I cried too, bitterly. Yes, more than anyone else has reason to cry. We parted unreconciled, and I shan't forgive myself. But for all that, I was not going to sympathize with him, the brute beast. Oh, give me the poker. This ring is the last thing of his I have about me. I'll smash it, and then I'll burn it. There. He shall buy me another, if he gets me back again. Oh, it's a pity Earnshaw is not his match in strength. I ought to remain to cheer Edgar and take care of the baby, but I tell you, he wouldn't let me. Do you think he could bear to see me grow fat and merry? Could bear to think that we were tranquil and not resolve on poisoning our comfort? Oh, Cathy had an awfully perverted taste to esteem him so dearly, knowing him so well. Oh, monster! Would that he were blotted out of creation and out of my memory.
He's a human being. Be more charitable. There are worse men than he is yet.
He's not a human being. I gave him my heart, and he took it and pinched it to death and flung it back at me. I will not pity him to my dying day.
though he groaned from this to his dying day and wept tears of blood for Cathy. Oh. Since her death, he has become a monster. He has been a stranger to the house from last Sunday to today. Whether the angels fed him or their kind beneath, I cannot tell. But he has not eaten a meal with us for nearly a week. Oh. He has just come home at dawn and gone upstairs to his chamber, locking himself in, as if anyone dreamt of coveting his company.
Miss Isabella, it's mean to add your torture to your husband's.
Isabella was driven away, never to revisit this neighbourhood. She kept up a regular correspondence with my master from her new abode in the south somewhere. There she had a son, whom she named Linton, born a few months subsequent to her flight. Hindley Earnshaw's death followed hard on his sister's. He reportedly died as drunk as a lord, his property mortgaged to Heathcliff, and Hareton was left no better than a beggar. The new master of Wuthering Heights had the hypocrisy to represent a mourner at the funeral.
Now, my bonny lad, you are mine, and we'll see if one tree won't grow as crooked as another, with the same wind to twist it. Come along, Ayrton Earnshaw.
Hareton must go back with me to Thrushcross Grange, sir. And there is nothing less in the world yours than he is.
Does Edgar Linton say so?
Of course. He's ordered me to take him.
Well, we'll not argue the subject now. But I have a fancy to try my hand at rearing a young one. So intimate to your master that I must supply the place of this with my own if he attempt to remove it. I don't engage to let Ayrton go undisputed, but I'll be pretty sure to make the other come. Remember to tell him, here's Ayrton for my son Linton.
The next time I saw Hareton was some 12 years later, when my young lady, roaming on her pony, found her forbidden way to Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff was away, and I found my strayed lamb perfectly at home, laughing and chatting to Hareton, now a great strong lad of 18, who stared at her with considerable curiosity and astonishment. When she gave him some imperious order, he grew as black as a thundercloud and swore at her. Had hard work to obtain a promise not to lay the grievance before her father, explaining that if she revealed my negligence and where she'd been, he would be so angry that I should have to leave. Catherine could not bear that prospect. Her affections, like her mother's, were intense. Though her anger was never furious, her love never fierce. A letter, edged with black, announced the day of my master's return.
Now, Catherine, your cousin Linton is not so strong or so merry as you, and he has lost his mother, remember, a very short time ago. Don't harass him much by talking. Let him be quiet this evening, at least. Take him into the parlour.
He looks very like you, Master Edgar.
The company of a child of his age will instill new spirit into him. And by wishing for strength, he'll gain it soon, Nellie. What is it, Joseph?
Heathcliff has sent me for his lad. I'll not go back without him.
Tell Mr. Heathcliff that his son shall come to Wuthering Heights tomorrow. He is too tired to go the distance now. You may also tell him that the mother of Linton desired him to remain under my guardianship, and at present his health is very precarious.
No, Heathcliff takes no account of mother, nor ye neither. But he'll have his lad, and I mun take him.
You shall not tonight. Repeat to your master what I have said.
Very well. Tomorrow he'll come in sen, and thrust him out, if you dare.
I shall be glad to take him over myself tomorrow, sir. Perhaps I can add my persuasions to yours.
I fear I shall have to come down and fetch my property myself. You've brought it, have you?
I hope you'll be kind to the boy, or you'll not keep him long. And he's all you have akin in the wide world that you will ever know, remember.
I'll be very kind to him. Besides, he's mine, and I want the triumph of seeing my descendant fairly lord of their estates, my child hiring their children to till their father's lands for wages. That is the sole consideration which can make me endure the whelp. I despise him for himself and hate him for the memories he revives. But that consideration is sufficient. He's as safe with me and shall be tended as carefully as your master tends his own. He shall have a tutor, and I've ordered Hareton to obey him. I've arranged everything with a view to preserve the superior and the gentleman in him above his associates. I do regret, however, that he so little deserves the trouble. I'm bitterly disappointed with the whey-faced, whining wretch.
Linton, as you soon shall hear, proved as miserable a creature as his father's words. We had sad work with little Catherine that day. She'd been so eager to join her cousin, but over the years his features had waxed so dim in her memory that she did not recognize him when next she saw him. When I chanced to encounter the housekeeper of Wuthering Heights, she said that Mr. Heathcliff seemed to dislike him even longer and worse, and that Linton was selfish and disagreeable. Time wore on at the Grange in its former pleasant way, till Miss Catherine reached 16.
You know, Ellen, that 20 times a day I covered Hareton in all his degradation. I'd have loved that lad had he been someone else. As it is, I've kept him ignorant, though he's no fool, and I can sympathize with all his feelings, having felt them myself. As for Linton, you'll see what a vapid thing it is. Oh, we calculate that it will scarcely last till it is 18.
How can you speak so of your own son? For shame, Heathcliff. It's very wrong for Catherine to visit Linton. You know what the master's reactions would be, and I'd get the blame.
I want her to see Linton. He's looking better these past 2 days.
What evil plans are you making, Heathcliff?
No evil plans. I might hope that the two young cousins will fall in love and get married. I'm acting as a benefactor. Mr. Linton's chit would be provided for as joint successor with my son. His property passes to the male heir, but to prevent any future dispute, I desire their union and am resolved to bring it about.
Miss Catherine's tender nature went out to her sickly cousin. It was shortly after this visit that I discovered that Mary had been smuggling in letters from the Heights to my young lady. Ha! Love letters from Linton. I burnt 'em, telling her not to upset her papa, who was not well. There followed a sad scene between them, when Mr. Edgar reluctantly told her something of the enmity between himself and Mr. Heathcliff.
Here's yet a flower. Does it not look melancholy, Ellen?
Aye, as sad and pale as you, Catherine.
I'll not pluck it.
Why are you crying, Catherine?
Papa has been so unwell. And what shall I do when you and he leave me?
Now, don't go tempting Providence by anticipating evil. We'll hope to have years and years ahead of us. Mr. Linton's not old, and I hail from a long-lived family.
Oh, Aunt Isabella died young.
Oh, she hadn't you and me to nurse her. It'd speed your father's recovery to see you looking more cheerful.
Oh.
And you, I'll not deny it might kill him if he discovered that you were mooning over the son of a person who'd be glad to have him in his grave.
Oh, I care for nothing except for Pa's illness. I would never vex him. I love him better than I do myself. Oh, I pray every night that he be spared any unhappiness.
Good day to you, Miss Linton, Mrs. Dean.
I won't speak to you, Mr. Heathcliff. Papa says you're a wicked man, and you hate us both, and Ellen says the same.
Good words, and just you remember 'em. Let's in before the rain.
Don't be in such a haste to leave. I've your letters here to Linton. Give me any pertness and I'll send them to your father.
Oh, no, don't do that. He's unwell. It would make him worse.
Unwell? Linton, your love, your darling, is dying. You have killed him with your false protestations of love. You have broken his heart. I tell you he will die unless you restore him.
Oh. Can you lie so to the child? Now, Miss Catherine, you know that it's impossible for someone to die for love of a stranger.
I swear that Linton is dying. Just imagine your father in my place and Linton in yours. Would he not plead with Linton to save you? I swear on my salvation he's going to his grave, and none but you can save him. Don't mind Mrs. Dean's cruel cautions. Be generous and contrive to see him. Dreams of you night and day, and cannot be persuaded that you do not hate him, since you neither write nor call. I am away for the week. I think that your master cannot object to a meeting.
Catherine insisted that we should call on her cousin. We found Linton lying on his couch as peevish as ever. He repeated Mr. Heathcliff's lies to her, that her own mother had hated Mr. Linton and loved his own. She was horrified, but her own too generous heart soon forgave him and his bad temper. I told her that we had paid our last visit there. On the succeeding morning, I was laid up with the worst cold I've ever had in my life. It was only after 3 weeks that I was strong enough to resume my duties and quit my chamber. Catherine read to me rather unwillingly, fretting and sighing, and frequently looking at her watch till it was time for supper. I thought her conduct cold, but she said she was feeling unwell herself. Later, I went up to her room to see how she was. She was not in her room. And where have you been riding out in the moonlight?
To the bottom of the park.
Nowhere else? You know you've been doing wrong.
Oh, promise not to be angry, Ellen. I've been to see Linton of Wuthering Heights. I've been every day during your illness, but it wasn't for myself. I felt wretched most of the time. But how could I abandon him?
And what of Mr. Heathcliff? Has he been there?
Yes, but he's always avoided me. I have hardly seen him. Oh, Linton has been so ill.
Your papa'll have to be told.
Oh, no, it would be heartless of you to tell Papa.
I'll make up my mind on that point by tomorrow, Miss Catherine. I'll leave you to your rest. Good night, Miss Catherine.
Will you pass my medicine, please, Ellen? I don't want Catherine to see me like this.
Oh, Master Edgar, I should never have told you.
You did quite right, Ellen. But I will not have Catherine going to Wuthering Heights. Linton will have to come here.
I doubt he could travel so far.
Then I shall allow them to meet for a walk once a week, but always accompanied by you. Oh, Ellen, I fear for Catherine's future. I'm not long for this world, and whatever will happen to my darling child. Thrushcross Grange will pass to Isabella's son on my death. What do you think of him? Is he a good man? Is he kind?
He's not vicious like his father. He's unlike him in any way.
Oh, thank God.
And if Miss Catherine were to marry him, he would not be beyond her control unless she were foolishly indulgent. Oh, don't talk of dying, Master. You've years and years to get to know the boy yourself, and there are years before he comes of age.
I've been very happy with my little Catherine, but I yearn to lie in her mother's grave beneath the green turf. If I could believe that she was safe and happy, I could resign myself to Heathcliff's achieving his ambitions. But if Linton be unworthy of her, I'd rather resign her to God than lay her in the earth before me.
Resign her to God as it is, sir. I shall stand her friend and counsellor to the last. Miss Catherine is a good girl, and I don't fear that she will go wilfully wrong. Catherine and I took Linton for a walk over the heath. He looked very frail and seemed uncommonly agitated. He told Catherine that his life was in her hands. When we observed Heathcliff riding towards us, he screamed and tried to run from him. As he ran, he fell heavily and lay unconscious on the grass. He was bleeding from the mouth. Heathcliff put him on his horse, saying that we must accompany him to the house, as the doctor might have to be sent for.
I see everyone's still at church. Ah, he's stirring. He looks better now. We'll put him on the couch.
Poor Linton.
Miss Catherine, I give you what I have, that the present is hardly worth the accepting.
What can you mean, Mr. Heathcliff?
Why? It is Linton. How she does stare. It's odd what a savage feeling I have to anything that seems afraid of me.
I'm not afraid of you. The doctor must be called. Unlock the door.
That I will not. Nay, Catherine, stand off or I'll knock you down, and that would make Mrs. Dean mad.
You shall let us go.
You villain! You villain! Oh!
I know how to chastise children. You can both weep your hearts out. I shall be your father tomorrow. All the father you will have in the next few days, if what I have heard of your father's health is true. You can bear plenty. You're no weakling. You'll feel my hand again if ever I see the devil of such a temper in your eyes again.
What can you hope to achieve by this? My master's dying. Let us back to him. You cannot keep us here.
Why, I'm going to call on Parson.
Oh.
The bells are silent now. Although they may not ring tomorrow, he has some business here.
Heathcliff forced the marriage. I was locked in the garret for 4 days. I saw 3 servants from the Grange knock at the door, and heard them turned away with the tale that neither Miss Catherine nor I had been seen. Mr. Linton died peacefully, entirely without a struggle. Mr. Heathcliff came to collect Catherine and return her to her husband, saying that she now owed her bread to him, and he would see that she earned it.
Yesterday, Nellie, I went to Cathy's grave.
Let her rest, Heathcliff.
I disturbed nobody, Nellie. No. She has disturbed me night and day through 18 years, incessantly, remorselessly, till yesternight. And yesternight I was tranquil. I dreamt I was sleeping the last sleep, with my heart stopped and my cheek frozen against hers. On the night after she was buried, I went to her grave. It began oddly. You know I was wild after she died, and eternally from dawn to dawn to dawn I prayed to her to return to me in spirit. I have a strong faith in ghosts. I have a conviction that they can and do exist among us. The day she was buried, there came a fall of snow. In the evening I went to the churchyard. It blew as bleak as winter. All round was solitary. I said to myself, I'll have her in my arms again. If she be cold, I'll think it is the north wind that chills me. And if she is motionless, it is sleep. I got a spade from the tool house and began to delve with all my might. It scraped the coffin. I fell to work with my hands. The wood commenced cracking with the screws. I was on the point of attaining my object when it seemed I heard a sigh from someone above, close at the edge of the grave. There was another sigh close to my ear. I appeared to feel the warm breath of it displacing the sleet-laden wind. I felt certain that Cathy was there, not buried but on the earth. A sudden sense of relief flowed from my heart through every limb. Her spirit led me home. I felt her by me. I could almost see her, and yet I could not. I ought to have sweated blood then from the anguish of my yearning, from my supplications to have just one glimpse. I had not one. She showed herself, as she often was in life, a devil to me. And when I slept in her chamber, I was beaten out of that. I couldn't lie there. The moment I closed my eyes, she was either outside the window, or entering the room, or even resting her darling head on the same pillow as she did as a child. But when I opened my eyes, oh. Now that I have seen her face again, I am pacified a little. It was a strange way of killing, not by inches but by fractions and hairbreadths, to beguile me with the spectre of hope through 18 years.
After Mr. Linton's death, he'd made a will leaving everything to his father and nothing to his widow. Zillah told me that she locked herself into her room. I would fain take a cottage and get her to live with me, but Mr. Heathcliff would as soon permit that as he would set Hareton in an independent house. I see no remedy but that she should marry, and that scheme does not come within my province to arrange.
Thus ended Mrs. Dean's story. Lockwood hastily left Thrushcross Grange to return to London. He was not to return to the area until September. At the time, he was on the way to visit a friend in the north, and he unexpectedly came within 15 miles of Gimmerton. A sudden impulse seized him to visit Thrushcross Grange. He was told that Mrs. Dean had moved to Wuthering Heights. She greeted him enthusiastically when he arrived there. She told him of Heathcliff's death 3 months earlier. He had had a queer end, was the way she expressed it. She had apparently been summoned by Heathcliff to Wuthering Heights within a fortnight of Lockwood's departure to take care of Catherine. As time passed by, Heathcliff began to grow more and more unsociable and morose. He seemed preoccupied, speaking little to anyone and spending long periods of time roaming outside. One day, after one such absence, Heathcliff returned at dusk. He walked to the hearth in evident agitation.
I take so little interest in my daily life that I hardly remember to eat or drink. About her I won't speak, and I don't desire to think. But I earnestly wish she were invisible. Her presence invokes only maddening sensations. I cannot look down at this floor, but her features are shaped in the flags, in every cloud, in every tree, filling the air at night and caught by glimpses in every image. The world is a dreadful collection of memoranda that she did exist, and that I have lost her. I have a single wish, and my whole being and faculties are yearning to attain it. They have yearned towards it so long and so unwaveringly that I'm convinced it will be reached, and soon, because it has devoured my existence. Oh, God, it's a long fight. I wish it were over.
Heathcliff did not quit the house again that day, and no one intruded on his solitude. At 8 o'clock, Nelly, unsummoned, took it upon herself to carry his supper and a candle to him. He was leaning against the ledge of an open lattice, but not looking out. His face was turned to the interior gloom. The light flashed on his appearance as she approached. She was deeply shocked by the way he looked, by the deep black eyes, the mirthless smile, and the ghostly paleness of his face. She was moved to appeal to him.
Mr. Heathcliff, master, don't for God's sake stare at me as if you saw an unearthly vision.
Don't for God's sake shout so loud. Turn round and tell me. Are we by ourselves?
Of course we are. Now come, Mr. Heathcliff. You've not eaten for hours. You must take something.
I haven't yet decided how I shall leave my property. I wish I could annihilate it from the face of the earth.
Don't talk so, Mr. Heathcliff. You'll be spared to repent of your many injustices yet. I never expected that your nerves would be disordered. They are at present, however, and almost entirely through your own fault. The way you've passed these last 3 days might overthrow a Titan. Now do take some food and some repose. You need only look at yourself in a glass to see how you require both. Now, if you would hear me without being angry, I might offer some advice that'd make you happier.
What is that? Give it.
You haven't had a Bible in your hands since you were a lad. You've lived a selfish, unchristian life. Could it be hurtful to send for a minister to explain its message and show you how unfit you are to enter heaven unless a change takes place before you die?
The next day, when she took her morning walk around the house, she observed Heathcliff's window swinging open and the rain driving straight in. She obtained entrance with another key and ran to undo the panels, for the chamber was vacant. Quickly pushing them aside, she peeped in. Heathcliff was there, laid on his back. His eyes met Nellie's so keenly and fiercely that she started, and then he seemed to smile. She could not believe he was dead, but his face and throat were washed with rain, the bedclothes dripped, and he was perfectly still. He was dead and stark. They buried him as he had wished. There were some who said he still walked. There were others who said they had met him near the church and on the moor. Whether or not these were idle tales was not known, but Joseph swore blind that he saw 2 of them every rainy night. Nellie believed that the dead were at peace. Nellie did not like living in that grim house. She was looking forward to when Catherine and Hareton were married on New Year's Day, and they could all move to Thrushcross Grange. Wuthering Heights would then be shut up, except for Joseph, and a lad to keep him company. And Nellie too was at peace, for the crown of all her wishes had been that Hareton and Catherine would marry, as at last they did. Pressing a remembrance into the hand of Mrs. Dean, Lockwood made his way back over the moors, away from Wuthering Heights. He entered the churchyard, and soon discovered the 3 headstones on the slope near the moor, the middle one grey and half buried in heath, Edgar Linton's only harmonized by the turf and moss creeping up its foot, Heathcliff's still bare. He lingered around them under that benign sky, watching the moths fluttering among the heath and harebells, listened to the soft wind breathing through the grass, and wondered how anyone could ever imagine unquiet slumbers for the sleepers in that quiet earth.